Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to MCIT's admissions webinar, Alumni with a Spotlight on Women in Technology. We're happy to offer this special admissions webinar, which features MCIT alumni that are impacting the tech industry. It'll be hosted by our Associate Director of Professional Development and Networking, Emily Parry. And the webinar will cover topics about how to seek out community and mentorship, as well as advice for women concerning a career switch into computer science, and some important resources and networking tips to be aware of. Please keep in mind we do have a Q&A tool available. For those of you that have questions, please put all of your questions into the Q&A section as opposed to the chat. For those of you who are joining us by phone, unfortunately you're not able to participate in the Q&A section and entering your questions, but you can also feel free to email us directly with any questions you have after the webinar. This will also be recorded, so you could look for the entire presentation on YouTube a few days after it concludes. So once again, please post all questions into the Q&A, and I would like to turn this over to Emily Parry, the Associate Director of Professional Development and Networking.
Thank you so much, Rafia, and thank you panelists for being here today. So as Rafia said, I'm going to be asking our panelists a few questions, but if you have any questions for us, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation now, go through some questions, and at the end, we'll make sure that we have some time to hear from you as well. So today I have Sara Weinstein and Meredith Margulies with me. Sara is a technical lead with Vanguard, and Meredith is a software engineer with Adobe. So both of you, Sara and Meredith, I'm going to ask you both to just start by telling us a little bit about your career trajectories. So where have you gone and where have you started? Tell us a little bit about internships, titles, job titles, what companies you were working for, and for how long you were at each company. I'm actually going to start with you, Meredith.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Meredith. So I currently work at Adobe. I've been there for about 3.5 years now. And I went to that full-time job right after finishing the MCIT program in December of 2016. And then before that, the summer between my first year of MCIT and my second year, I did an internship at Athena Health, also as a software engineer, which is it's a health startup, and I worked in Austin, Texas that summer. And then previous to that, I did an internship at a small startup in London, where I was sort of like a jack of all trades, but I did a decent amount of UX and UI design around their website, and did some data analytics for them. So yeah.
Thanks so much. Sara, do you mind telling us a little bit about your career past?
Sure. My career path is a little longer and with some gaps in it. My career in tech is actually a career change for me. I started out my first degree, I got a degree in philosophy, and then I went back to school and I got a degree in mechanical engineering. And I worked in engineering, I worked in the aviation business. I was not doing anything in computer science. And I did that for a while. And I then left the workforce to raise my children. And I have 4 wonderful children, and they're all very much older now. And at one point I wanted to go back and to the workforce. And I decided that instead of going back to engineering, I wanted to go into computer science. And I found out about the MCIT program, and I enrolled, and I graduated from the MCIT program in 2016. And in the fall of that year, I started working for Vanguard Investment Company in their institutional IT division. I have been there since February 2017. I started out as a entry-level developer. I was promoted to mid-level developer within like a year and a half, and then I went up to senior developer, and last year I was promoted to being a technical lead for my team. So I've been there about 3.5 years, and I've been promoted quickly. I've had a very good career at Vanguard. I'm working primarily in REST service work. I did a little bit of UI design. I get involved in a lot of different things. It is my first job in IT. When I was in the MCIT program, I did not do an internship. I can I will say that as a returning student and as a mom of 4 children, if anyone out there is in that situation, it was very difficult to get an internship. But everyone said, don't worry, you won't have a problem getting an actual job. And they were absolutely right. So no internships. I went straight. My first IT job was the one that I'm at now. And I'm enjoying it. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Sara. I think that both of you are showcasing a really important part of MCIT, which is it attracts people with all different walks of life. But the one thing that you both have in common was that interest in computer science. So my question I'm actually going to start with you again, Meredith. My question is, how did you sort of realize that computer science was the thing that you wanted to pursue next? When we had chatted, you had mentioned that your friends and some people you knew were the first to sort of give you that exposure to CS. So would you mind telling us a little bit about that first realization that computer science might be a good fit for you?
Yeah, sure. So I guess something to start, I actually grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a small little suburb. And we, at that point, I think until my senior year, had no real computer science classes. I think there was only one that began my senior year. So I really didn't have much exposure to computer science in high school. And then when I came into college, I thought maybe I would go to law school, but I really always loved math and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I ended up majoring in economics, but always really loving math, but knew I did not want to do a math PhD or go into academia. And I luckily had a lot of friends who were actually in computer science at Penn in undergrad, and I used to help them out a lot with homeworks and things like that. And they, always said, Meredith, you would love this. Like, you would love computer science. I think it'd be a really good fit for you. But, my response is always, well, it's my junior year of college. I can't exactly start a new undergraduate degree right now, financially and just in terms of time. So luckily, one of my friends who had done a dual degree from both Wharton and engineering had heard of the MCIT program and told me about it because it was something he wished he had looked into. And so I looked into the program a bit more. I ended up applying to submatriculate. And then after my internship working at a small tech startup, I really decided it was something I wanted to pursue. So yeah, did my first year and then really decided to finish up the program and do my internships and go into software engineering.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that really develops an experience that many students have. So you're in undergraduate, you have to take these certain classes, and then all of a sudden halfway through you have this new interest, right? And you're saying, well, how many credits until graduation? How am I going to work this in? This is a new passion of mine. Sometimes the confines of higher ed can sort of help you find an outlet to that type of opportunity. So I'm glad that you were able to sort of make that transition. So Sara, you have a completely different experience, but I think really is very relevant to many of the people who are considering this program, especially the online version because of the flexibility that it offers. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about what was going on in your mind. You had this whole engineering career, you were momming, and your family was a big part of the energy that you were expending. As you were looking into computer science and the MCIT online program, what was going through your mind and how did you make the choice to take the leap?
Okay. Well, first of all, I didn't do it online. I did it in person.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so used to saying MCIT online. So sorry.
It didn't exist when I was there.
Right.
If it had, things might have been different. My perspective is different. I reached a point in my life where like I said, I want to go back to the workforce. And I've always been attracted to more technical fields. I had taken a couple of computer science classes earlier in my life, thought, wow, this is interesting. I'd like to do this, but I'm already on track. I didn't do what Meredith did. I didn't change tracks. I stayed with what I was doing, even though I think I should have done CS back at the time. And I decided that I was fortunate enough that I could devote some time to the program. I decided that I wanted to go into CS and give myself a chance. So I started to learn on my own. I started to teach myself. There are a lot of people who will tell you, oh, you can teach yourself CS, you don't need a degree. And the truth is in my experience, there's no way I'd be where I am now if I hadn't gone to the MCIT program and gotten the degree, because I was trying to do it myself, taking Coursera courses, buying books on Teach Yourself Java. It is not even close to the level of intensity that you need to really, I think if I had done that, it would have taken me 15 years to get where I got in 2 years, and maybe I'd never have gotten there. And the interactions, the meeting people, I found that that was incredibly valuable. I can't say enough about how important it is to, at least for me, to be in a structured program. So I decided that I wanted to go into computer science, and that even though I was older, much older when I started, my motto was always, I'm not dead yet, you know, and I'll share, I was 48 when I started the program, and I graduated when I was 50. And it was grueling and intense, but it was so worth it. And I had many moments I didn't think I was going to make it, but when I did and I got out, and I'm having an absolute renaissance career in my career right now that I never would have imagined 10 years ago. So that's really, you know, for me, it was a tremendous way to relaunch myself back into the workforce. And I cannot emphasize enough how helpful the MCIT program was for anyone who thinks that they would like to have a career in tech. You have not missed the boat. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say is you haven't missed the boat. The boat's still out there. Get on it.
Thank you. So this whole panel is about women in tech. So I am going to sort of ask the question that I think is probably on everyone's minds, which is honestly, what is it like working in a male-dominated field? Technology is still dominated by men, recruiting practices. You just walk into a room and you see a lot of men in this tech sector. So Meredith, I'm going to start with you again, because I really liked your story about your interview experience with Adobe. So I'd love to hear that perspective, and just overall what your impressions are as a woman and looking for that representation in this industry.
Yeah, so when I went through my interview experience, or all my interview experiences for full-time, it was towards the end of my MCIT program and a little bit after. And I interviewed with the team I'm on now at Adobe, which is specifically the Adobe XD team, which is an app for UX and UI design. So I met with, I think, 5 or 6 different engineers. I chatted with one woman who was an engineer who'd been there for a year or 2 at that point. And I had really great experiences. I really enjoyed speaking with everyone. And it didn't really occur to me to ask about the gender diversity on our team or within Adobe at all. So I started, I think a couple months later, and come to find she was pretty much the only female product engineer on our entire product at that time, which I think had well over 100 engineers, but I think maybe 100 to 150. And we did have some female quality engineers, a couple female engineering managers, maybe 2 at that point, out of maybe 15. So that was definitely a bit of a rude awakening for me, that, you know, there weren't really going to be easily found female mentors who were working around me. And it was certainly intimidating, I think, to walk into, you know, your team room and it's full of 12 men who are at that point, you know, much more established, have been working in tech much longer than me. So that was really interesting. But I think something that was great was a couple women on our product formed a women in engineering group that encompasses all of our quality engineers, our engineering managers, and now the additional female product engineers that we have. And that's been a really great group to build a camaraderie between women, find mentors for different women in different roles. People who've worked in other parts of Adobe have brought in female speakers who have leadership roles in other products in Adobe. So, you know, I think finding a group of women on your team is, you know, it helps out a lot, I think, to find women who can push you up and push other women up and have a space for that. has been incredibly rewarding for me. And I lead that group now, so it's been a really great experience for me.
Thanks. I think it's so great that you had said, you know, in my interview, I didn't think to ask about what the gender diversity is here. I think a lot of times it's because your palms are sweating and you're too nervous about talking about yourself, that sometimes it's hard to remember to ask the questions about, well, what's my fit going to be, or what's going on here. So I think it's a great sort of reminder to people that, you know, you can feel empowered when you are connecting with employers or future employment opportunities, to ask the question of what sort of resources do you have for me, or what, especially because employers usually they love to talk about that. If they have the structure in place that has a women in engineering group, they love the opportunity to tell people about that because they want you to feel at home and feel comfortable in their settings. So doing that type of research and trying to identify the employers that do have those opportunities and those supports are so important. Sara, when we had chatted, you made a similar realization that, you know, you've noticed that certain groups will have more women in them. I would love if you could talk a little bit about your experience with that at Vanguard.
Sure. I noticed that, okay, I do have to backtrack a tiny bit and just say that when I first entered the workforce in the 1990s, I believe, as a mechanical engineer and as a woman, there were no other women. I was several jobs, and in every single one of them, I was the only woman anywhere in the engineering department other than the secretary. And so I was sort of used to that. And for me, entering the workforce again in 2017, I was overjoyed with how many women there were in technology, because compared to where I came from 25 years earlier or whatever, it was a big difference. It was a huge improvement. I was so happy to see that there were other women developers. But one of the things I noticed is that when I first came on, I'm like, wow, I'm in an IT department and it's like half women and half men. It's pretty diverse. But as I got more familiar with my team and with my division and everything, what I discovered is that the women in tech tend to shift more towards testing and management, and they don't stay in the 100% technical roles. And I think there's some reasons for that. I think that positive and negative, I don't know if you want to talk about that. I think that I honestly think that women do suffer from imposter syndrome more than men, and they're more likely to doubt their technical abilities and be more likely to grab onto an opportunity to go for something that's slightly less technical. I think also women do make very good managers, technical managers. A woman developer makes a great technical manager, and some of the best managers I've had have been women who were formerly developers. So there's like, it's a good, on the one hand, you know, it's a tie. But on the other hand, I'd like to see women represented more in the hard technical roles, because as I've moved forward and I'm now a technical lead, I am now very much in the minority again. There's only like 2 of us in a pool of men. And whereas when I first came and you were looking at everyone, so it is hard as a woman in tech sometimes to stay strictly technical, because there is a push both from within and from without to move into slightly very, very valuable roles. I mean, QA, testing, management, we couldn't do what we do without them. But women tend to go there. And I myself, I really like the technical end, and I am firmly committed to staying in a technical role and not not move else, and not go anywhere else, just stay on this technical road. I think it's important, especially for younger female developers, to be there for them and to support them. So that's where I'm staying.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable observation, especially for folks who are trying to get a better sense about the makeup of a company or an industry. The fact that you can sort of dive that deep and tell us a little bit about your observations is really helpful. You had mentioned imposter syndrome, so I'd love to ask a question about that to both of you. Sara, I'm actually going to start with you. So do you mind telling us about a time where you experienced imposter syndrome, and you know, how do you deal with it? On the one hand, it's important for us to name it and recognize it and define it, because once we can do that, we can start to recognize when we're experiencing it and tell it to quiet down.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I actually looked up, just in case anyone doesn't know, the definition of imposter syndrome is feeling that you are somehow inadequate, even though you have achieved success, that you still feel that you are somehow inadequate, there's something fraudulent about the success that you've had and you don't really believe it, that you're really not up to the job that you have. Any day, and I have suffered from imposter syndrome my whole life. I would say that, when did I suffer from imposter syndrome? I would say, when did I not? And I find that it's something I've been fighting for years, and I couldn't be where I'm at if I weren't fighting it constantly. But I think the important thing to know is that imposter syndrome is a real thing. That if you feel that you are inadequate, that you're really not good at tech, and that it might not be true. It might be just this feeling that you have, and women especially feel it. We feel that we don't belong in tech, and no one's telling us that. We're telling ourselves that. And I find that what really helps is talking to people. I really think that's why going to the MCIT program and having meeting with other students really helps. I was a TA, I was a teaching assistant. I got to grade everybody else's homework. It was tremendously helpful to see that just because you're struggling doesn't mean everyone else isn't too, and discover that, if there's something that you just don't understand, and MCIT program, I will say, was very hard. And there was a lot that I just felt like, I'm just not getting this. And I had those moments where I said, oh, who am I kidding myself? I'm 48 years old. I can't do this. I discovered that there were 22-year-olds that weren't getting it either. And it really did help me put perspective on it. And it also helps me frequently, and I have it at work sometime. One of the best things for me was getting to my job, and I was mentored by a veteran. He's been around, my mentor is not female, but it didn't matter to me at all. And because he and I have a great relationship, and he was very open and accepting, and he's someone who I really look up to, and he knows so much. He's been doing this for 20, 30 years. And we would look at stuff and he'd say, I don't get this. And it shocked me. And I realized that, it doesn't mean that he's bad. He doesn't know what he's doing. Technology is constantly evolving. There's always new things. There's always you can't know everything. And when you realize that just saying, well, I know this, but I don't know that, it doesn't mean that you don't know anything. It doesn't mean that you're inadequate, that you're bad, that you don't, that you're incompetent as a software engineer, as a developer. You know what you do. You may not know what someone else is doing. And I think it's very often, perspective is very, very important in fighting off imposter syndrome. And there are times when you will not know something that you should know, and that doesn't invalidate everything else. And I've really, asking questions, being able, I think getting past that fear of looking bad, because if in your core you believe that you are inadequate and don't really know what you think you know, it makes you afraid sometimes to ask questions. Like, I don't want to ask the questions because I'm going to look stupid and then everyone's going to know that I really don't know anything. And you have to force yourself to get past that, because the only way you're going to get to that point where you feel confident is if you ask questions. And I've learned that no matter how much I may be shaking and terrified inside, I raise my hand and I say, I don't know this. Can someone please explain this to me? And sure enough, I do that. And 10 other guys, will say, oh, I'm glad you said that. I don't get this either, And it's like, you're not the only one who doesn't understand things. Ask the questions, ask the questions, ask the questions. And after a while, imposter syndrome is still there, but it's more like, it's okay, you're there, you can go sit in the corner right now, and I'm going to pretend you're not here. And it gets easier to ignore it after you develop more confidence and you start proving to yourself, and you don't have to be perfect. Being confident doesn't mean knowing everything and being perfect at your job. It just means that you know what you know, and you're competent at what you are supposed to already have learned. And it doesn't mean there aren't 95% more of your job you haven't learned yet. But if the 5% you know, then good, own it and keep going. And it's very hard, and don't let it stop you. I almost dropped out of the program in the middle because of imposter syndrome, and I'm glad I stayed. It was the best thing. I fought through it. And get perspective. I'm sorry, one more thing. I know I'm talking a lot. Get perspective. I think I mentioned that I spoke to the head of the program at the time, and I said, I feel like I'm just not, making it. And he said, we think you're doing great. I said, really? So get perspective. Talk to someone else. And, talk to someone else, because your perspective may not be correct. And
that was a great answer. Yeah, I get perspective, sort of try and identify and silence that fear. All of that is so great. Meredith, do you have anything to add, or can you think of a time maybe where you felt like imposter syndrome was really impacting an experience that you were having, and how do you handle it?
Yeah, I think early on at work, definitely I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. You know, I came into a lot of the work I do at Adobe is incredibly technical, incredibly math-based, like very graphics work was something I had never touched at all. And then within sort of the first week, I was expected to be doing 3D transforms and things like that I just didn't have a ton of background in. I think, as Sara said, not being afraid to ask questions and not being afraid to admit when you don't understand or don't know something was something I found incredibly hard to, and I still work on today, really forcing myself to be okay with not being perfect and being okay with asking other people how they do something, or, you know, taking others' advice and really listening to other people around you can be incredibly rewarding. Just one thing I would like to add is I went to the Grace Hopper conference last year with Adobe, and it was something I went as just an attendee. We were doing some hiring, but I wasn't as involved in that. And I will say it was an incredible experience. I think coming from imposter syndrome as well, you know, as I said, I think almost every meeting I've been in at Adobe has been majority male. And going into a conference where that was incredibly technical, you know, there are softer talks, but there's also incredibly highly technical, detailed talks. And being in a room that is 98% women was incredibly empowering for me. And I really think anyone on this webinar, feel free to look into the conference. I know that there's student passes. So if you end up in MCIT, definitely look into it. It's a really, really great opportunity. And I will be attending this year too. So you can reach out to me too if you end up attending, I guess.
Nice. That is great. Yeah, finding that community, and Grace Hopper is a great opportunity to find that community and like-mindedness. So question for both of you, whoever wants to jump in first, feel free. Based on your experiences and your observations, what strengths do you think women bring to the tech field?
I guess I can start. Something I think that women do incredibly well is being empathetic. Not that men can't be empathetic, but I do think most women I come across just have a higher base level of empathy. And I think it can be an incredibly useful tool in connecting with people you're working with. I found I really do my best work when I really deeply care about the people I'm working with, and we sort of care what we're working on together. And so I think women can use that tool to really make great work. And working with customers too, I think women can be so empathetic towards customers and really understand their pain points. And, you know, it helps in management as well, but having an engineer who's empathetic to a customer and who cares about design and some of these other things that maybe have traditionally been a little more female, I think can be incredibly useful in a technical atmosphere.
Great.
You want me to also respond to that?
Yeah, if you have thoughts, please share.
Okay, so I absolutely agree with what Meredith said. I will also say, however, I mean, I've met women that aren't empathetic and I've met men that are, so it's not guaranteed, but there's definitely a tendency for women to be more empathetic, and in several ways that's helpful. Okay, so what I would say is, what do women bring to tech? I think it doesn't really matter, women or men. Women are capable of the exact same cognitive strength as men. So why would we want to like lose half the population of people who can code, you know? It's like, you know, women bring some of the same things to tech that men do, which is strong cognitive ability, logical thinking, a desire to accomplish something, to work with a team, get things done. We bring a lot of the same things as men. There's nothing that, like, you know, we're lacking, but we do also bring a more of a sensitivity. One thing also though is technology, in most cases, it depends on exactly what field you're in, but Technology always serves an end user some way. And I certainly know in my role, my company, I mean, we are directly creating products that are going to be interacted with people. And it's very important to understand your users. And I think that you need diverse perspectives. You need men and women, you need people of different cultures and races, and you need to have, I think, a diverse perspective when you're talking about user experience for technology, because it's really hard for a group of people that are very, very monolithic to determine, you know, what is appropriate for all your end users. So having those different perspectives, a sensitivity to all the different end users, having that in the mix is really helpful. It's also women, you know, women also can bring a creativity. That, I mean, men also can be creative, but women can also be creative in different ways. And I mean, technology, you have to have a certain level of creativity as well. You have to be logical and creative, which is one of the reasons why I like tech, and kind of goes both together. And that's not just straight math. And I think it's important for women to be there for each other, to support each other in the workplace. So for women that are already there, it really does help to have other women around. And we bring different perspectives, we bring our strengths. And I think that that tech is better, that there's so many women, so many more women in it now.
Yeah, that actually leads me perfectly to my next question, which is, both of you had shared that you have had women mentors and women managers in your roles, and it's always so exciting, and it has been fulfilling for both of you working with those folks. How do you find community? So for folks who are thinking about moving into a technology position, or honestly transitioning into tech, what sort of advice would you have for finding that community if you don't get hired and your boss doesn't happen to just be a woman? How do you sort of make that step to connect with others that have that likeness with you?
That's a tough question because I've kind of just fallen into it. But I would say conferences can be good opportunities. And it depends what you mean by community. I mean, there's, I think that sometimes, especially if you're not in the field, you're not working in the field yet, you're not even in school yet, go online, and there are a lot of really good female like podcasters. You can, I mean, this isn't exactly community, but I found speakers that I liked. I listened to some of the things and I follow them, and just, you know, following the Twitter feed of like a woman in tech can sometimes feel a little empowering to me. Like, you know, I get my role models there, and there's like a number of women out there that I have followed. I'm a little too busy right now, but with a real job. But but sometimes when you have absolutely no one close, following people on LinkedIn or Twitter, it can be good, and that can help. Going to conferences and talking to people can be good. And once you start working though, I mean, even if you're somewhere and you're on a team and there's no women around, there are women somewhere. You can find them and reach out to them. There's online forums. I haven't done this. I know other people have. There's online groups you can join. You can get active in them. I have just Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. You can tell I'm old because I still use Facebook. And there's and you can join, and it's not the same as sitting and having coffee with someone, but it's a start. It is a start. And now with everything being virtual, it's even harder. But you can go out there and start. And Meredith, I don't know if you want to join. I was going to say about in the workplace though, is sometimes the best way to start making connections in the workplace is find someone who's doing find a woman that you would like to get closer to and build a relationship with. Find out what they're working on. And sometimes it's easier to form a relationship if you find a way to support their project in some way. It's hard to just call someone up and just say, "Hi, will you be my mentor?" You know, but I have an official mentor, but the way I got to know her was she needed help with something and I volunteered. So that's just, once you get into the workforce, put yourself out there, especially if there's a woman on another team that needs something. Spend a little bit of your extra time if you have to. Do some stretch work and help. There's open source projects you can contribute to online. Put some work out there. The best way to connect with women in tech, I think, is through the tech. And, you know, because we're all working. So do something that helps them, and then you start talking, and then that's how you can start a relationship. Meredith, do you have any other?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're still in school, yeah, it can be difficult. There are a lot of meetups, and I'm assuming most of them are online at this point. So like anything you're interested in, I think there's probably a meetup or group that meets online about it, and that can be a good way to meet people. And then, yeah, once you're at work, don't be afraid to sort of reach out to people, maybe on a personal sort of level also first, like just try to get to know someone and see if they'd be a good fit for a mentor. And then, they're also seeing if you'd be a good fit for a mentee. I think mentorship is very, I don't think it's completely, net, they have to give everything to you. I've learned so much from people I've mentored, and I would hope that people who have mentored me have also learned things from me. But yeah, just reach out to people and women that you work with and really try to get to know them. I know at my work, the women I work with have said that it can be hard for them in meetings or getting to know people because they're a little softer spoken, and a lot of the men I work with are not as soft spoken. And so really trying to reach out on, a one-on-one basis, or not always, or propping them up in meetings and saying, hey, what does this person think? And supporting women can be a really good bridge to getting to know them and getting into the more mentorship role.
Perfect. Yeah.
Can I just like double endorse what you just said? Don't forget that once you get there and your career is moving along, do not forget to support other women as well, because they're searching for that and someone, whoever helped you, turn around and do that. I also support other women, in the workforce as well. It's really important for women to support the ones that are up and coming.
Something that you're both doing right now. So thank you. You are walking that talk right now. So I have one last question, and then I'm going to move into questions from our audience. So my final question is very broad. What advice do you have for folks who are considering going and taking the dive and joining this program? Is there any advice that you have for them just as learners, as people who are working now, as alumni who have been there? What is your overall advice?
I guess I can start. Something I will always say to start in your first year, even when you think you're not ready, don't be afraid to apply to internships, and don't be afraid to go through interviews, even if you feel like you're not ready. I interview a lot now in my role, and I'm never going to blacklist someone for performing poorly in an interview, but I know when I was interviewing, it is super helpful to get practice interviewing. And there are resources to do that. I think mock interviews and things, which can be really helpful. But, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, even if you don't feel like you're 100% ready. You can be way more ready than you think you are. And you don't always know what the interviewer is looking for. I know for us, when we look at internships, we've definitely hired interns who I'm pretty sure thought they failed their interview when they walked out, because we're just looking for, someone who's really excited to learn and can show their thought process well and is a good communicator. And, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And, find parts of computer science that you might be passionate about that are outside your classes. Don't be afraid to look into open source, and, there's so much out there, and there's so much beyond even what MCIT can offer in terms of different areas of tech that, you might not even know about. So just get curious about technology and what might be a best fit for you.
I think I would say that my advice is, let's be real, it's a lot of work. It is worth it, and you will make it, but the MCIT program is not easy, and you have to be prepared to put in a lot of time. Coding takes time, especially when you're first learning. So, keep that in mind, whatever you're, I would say for myself, having a family, a husband and children and a house to manage, I had to make changes in my life before I started it, and it wasn't easy. But not everyone's in my situation, but if anyone is in my situation, you need to have a talk with your family before you start and let them know that you are going to have to be working many hours. And it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's horrible, but you don't underestimate. It's not like you can spend 2-3 hours a day and then you get through the program. You need to spend a lot of time, and expect on the weekends, you're going to be spending half your weekend, maybe coding, and maybe you'll be lucky and you'll have some weeks where it's not like that, some weeks where you will, but just set your life up so that you can spend the time. I would say the other thing that I would say is reach out as much as you can. I don't know if the same faculty is still there. I think most of them are. The faculty are terrific in the program, and they're very, very welcoming to students, and they reach out and they want to help as much as they possibly can. Faculty have office hours. Your TAs, your teaching assistants have office hours. Go to them. Go to office hours for your faculty. Go to office hours for your teaching assistants. Go online, post in forums. We had that, I don't know, it's called something else now, but post questions online. And like Meredith said, don't be afraid to go after things, even if you don't think you're ready for it. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I can't say enough, it's, for the amount of time and money that you're investing in this career, you should feel comfortable asking any question you feel like. Ask a lot of questions, do a lot of work, take advantage of all the resources that Penn had. Penn had a lot of resources. I was very happy there. Take advantage of everything. Take advantage of resources outside of Penn as well. Online, Google, if you have friends that are software engineers, I did that. I hit them up and say, hey, can you explain this concept to me? And work really hard and start applying for internships and jobs early, even when you don't think you're ready. You said, because it comes as fast as you can. And yes, I highly recommend taking courses, take at least one course in something that's a little out of your main focus. And it really does help. I took a course in network engineering. It was so valuable, to get something just a little bit off. It was in electrical engineering and soft, and systems engineering. It was really good to get a little bit out, but it's a great program if you're willing to put in the work and be brave and strong. And sometimes being brave and strong is admitting that you're exhausted and lost, and that's okay. Keep going.
I love that. Okay, that was perfect ending. Perfect end to the official questions. So I just looked through our channel, and I have a few questions for the group. The first is about internships. So I get this question a lot from even my current students, which is, should I do an internship? And my answer is always, it depends. So both of you have had pretty unique experiences with doing internships and not. So I'm going to start by giving my advice and then ask you both to sort of tell me about what you guys did. I shouldn't say you guys, what you folks did. Emily, come on, look alive. So in terms of internships, some students are taking this course and doing MCIT online and are not working or are working part-time or have more flexibility. In that case, I usually say an internship is a great opportunity for you. Another thing, if you are someone who's really doing a career change and has figured out a way to set up your life where you can sort of rearrange things so that you can do an internship, that's a great opportunity for you as well. Internships are good for helping you in that full-time job search after the fact. However, many of our students, especially in the online program, cannot rearrange their lives for an internship. Many of you are working full-time and you have families, and you can't imagine quitting the job that you have in order to sort of start all over right away. That is fine too. If you decide that an internship isn't right for you, or if the universe decides that an internship isn't right for you, the way that you offset that is you engage in really powerful projects to include on your resume so that you can talk to employers and showcase the application of your technical skills through that project work. So students who have internships, students who have projects, all of that are great opportunities for you to talk to an employer about your technical skills. That's what they're looking at. So I'm gonna ask Meredith, I can't remember, did you do an internship with MCIT?
Yeah, I did.
Tell us a little bit about what that search looked like.
Yeah, so luckily I did sort of have a good awareness of the process just because I was also an undergrad. So I was pretty aware of when applications fell, kind of fall, I think is generally the main search for interns. So unfortunately, that generally is the first, or for the normal school year, that's generally the first fall that you begin the MCIT program, is unfortunately when a lot of the internship search begins. And, you know, I think I gave myself until November until I would be ready to apply. And I really just started applying to, you know, any internship that I thought would be interesting and at a company I thought, you know, maybe I could see myself at, but really more just a place I could learn from. So I think I did a number of different interviews. I absolutely bombed my first internship interview. It was the worst interview I've ever given, for sure. But, you know, it was a great learning experience. And beyond that, I eventually did end up getting an internship at Athena Health, which was a really good experience. I think it was a really good experience to understand what it would look like to be an engineer full time, and really what sitting down and coding for the majority of a workday really feels like, what working with a agile team would look like. Even though I was working on my own project, you know, kind of seeing what engineers do every day, that was incredibly useful for me. I think to understand what I wanted out of a job and what I wanted, if I wanted to go into software engineering, or if I wanted to think about product management, or, you know, the different sort of areas that you can go into. An internship can be a good way to understand that. But as you said, yeah, as someone who does a lot of hiring, and especially a lot of new graduate hiring and internship hiring, we really are just looking for some bigger projects that you can talk about your work on, and that doesn't need to be in an internship. Like, if you want to build a hobby app, then that is more than sufficient to cover interviews, and we just really want to see that you're passionate about something and that you sort of have worked on something a little bit more long term than a lot of the projects that happen in any computer science program. So contributing to open source or working on your own thing can absolutely suffice for that. But if you do have the opportunity, or if you're able to do an internship, it can be a good way to really understand what working as a software engineer would feel like every day, I think.
Gotcha. Perfect. And now, Sarah, you have the perfect opposite story of that. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your internship, your non-internship experience, and then what your job search was like?
So I started interviewing looking for internships. I put in applications. I actually didn't even get interviews. My background, I went to a recruiting fair, and I had a recruiter tell me to my face, you're just not the kind of candidate we look for. And it's true. When they hire interns, we hire a bunch of interns, they're sort of a class, they socialize together, you know, so we look to people to be kind of around the same age. And I thought, wow, that was on the one hand pretty brash, but really honest. And I appreciated the honesty, because I got passed over, and someone else told me something kind of similar about being a non-traditional applicant. So maybe it's just my experience, but I'm really not what people are looking for an intern, to be an intern. I do want to say I did get an internship. I did apply to, was interviewed for, and get an internship that I didn't do because there was a technical difficulty. It was actually with the FBI, with the government. Because for them, they're not Google. They're not looking for a group of young people to go out and play ping pong together. I mean, it's government. So you might look for non-traditional internships. There were budget cutbacks and whatnot, and it took them so long to do my background check because of my age that by the time my background check was done, the internship was over. So I missed it. But anyway, that was where I found foothold. So if you are a non-traditional student, look for some non-traditional internships. It's probably an uphill climb to go to Google or Facebook or Amazon or the big ones, but they're smaller companies, you might have more luck. However, that being said, I did not do an internship. I did not do any big projects that were not required for class. However, the projects that were required for class were big enough and detailed enough that I could talk about them in interviews. So I could say, we had to that one class, we had to build like a mini search. You build Google basically by yourself. And having gone through that exercise, I could talk about that in interviews. So I found that being able to talk about my coursework was able to get me through interviews. I took an extra class over the summer instead. So not doing an internship did not hurt me. One thing I will make a plug for, I would say that I think what Meredith referred to was really good, is that it's a good experience. Doing an internship can be a great way of seeing if you're a good fit for it. But if you're concerned that if you do an internship, you won't get a job, I don't think that's a rule. And not everyone is in the position to do it. It would have been very hard for me, especially as a mom, to do an internship. I was willing to do it anyway, but I managed to land a job anyway. I will put in a plug for the Penn Career Services. I got it through Penn Career Services. I found that when it came time to get a job, one thing that is, I think, working in everyone's favor is that there is a huge hiring trend in tech right now. I mean, all companies are looking to hire. They really want to hire. They're interviewing by the thousands. So it's not super like difficult to get an internship. To get an interview for a job. There's a ton of applicants out there, and they are hiring. Every company I spoke to was hiring. It's not impossible to have a career in tech without ever having done an internship. It's not a requirement. It's a nice to have, but it's not required. And there are other avenues. And if you contribute to open source software, that's great. If you do a project, great. But really, just the projects that I did for my courses, talking about them, I got in.
Yeah.
And it got me a job. So
great, thank you. Along that same vein, we had a question from the group that I also hear a lot, which is, how am I going to compare with people who did their undergrad in computer science? And my answer is always, oh, yeah, it'll be fine because the students, our outcomes are that students get jobs. But have either of you ever had the experience where a recruiter asked you, you felt uncertain about your technical skills, or you felt uncertain about going into a conversation because you didn't have that bachelor's degree? And how did you approach that?
I would say that part of the MCIT program is that I don't know if it's changed enough, but you take the 6 MCIT courses, and then you take your 4 graduate classes with the regular graduate CS. So I found that within the MCIT program, once I hit those regular graduate computer science grad level courses, I was able to see how I stood up and compared to students who had an undergraduate degree already, who had gone CS all the way. And what I did find is, to be perfectly honest, there were some things that I was missing, but that can be remedied. I certainly knew, I graduated, my grades were fine. I graduated, I did fine. I was able to hold my own against people who had in the classroom, and out in the real world, the truth is that I've actually performed better than people who have undergraduate degrees in computer science, but that was 20 years ago. And they've been working in COBOL for the last 20 years, and I'm teaching them Java. So technology changes so much. I don't feel that it has been an issue at all. I feel like every once in a while, I don't know if you have the Meredith, every once in a while, like something will come up like, oh, I never learned that. But it's nothing that you can't spend like an hour or two and fix that gap and learn. It's never anything big. And for the most part, I'm doing just fine. No one would ever, people say they would never know that I didn't study CS for like a million years. So.
Perfect. Meredith?
I would definitely echo that, and also just say I almost found it more valuable in a certain sense just because it's so much more condensed than a traditional undergrad degree is. If you think about it, when traditional undergrads are taking classes, they're really it's almost the MCIT program is over a couple different years. So if they take a normal software engineering class in their freshman fall and don't take another one until the next fall, you go 6 months maybe without doing that type of engineering because you're taking discrete math classes, or it's a little bit less condensed. And I really, really loved the way that the MCIT program was structured in that sense. I could really focus on my computer science, and that was what I was learning, and I didn't have to stretch myself to other disciplines at the same time. And it made everything really fresh in my mind for interviews, which is generally where a lot of this more traditional computer science questions are asked, especially in like entry-level interviews. So I really love the program. I would say it did not in any way hinder me, especially once I was in full-time and had finished all those core classes, from performing well in interviews. You know, I think everyone has to practice, and don't expect that, you know, your classes will make you perfect immediately. Like, you do need to put in a lot of time for yourself to get those core principles down. But, you know, if you do, it's all in there, and I think it's a great foundation for work. I also work with a bunch of engineers who have been software engineers for 20 years, and I will echo what Sara says. Sometimes, you know, they come from really different backgrounds because no one was working in JavaScript and V8 like I am now when they started. So, you know, everyone has a different background in the workforce. So don't be nervous about your abilities.
Yeah, I love that. Similarly, some edges that I think MCIT Online have that I sort of want to point out is we teach you the core so that you can get through the technical interview. You will have the technical expertise to get these jobs. But many of you are bringing all these very valuable transferable skills with you that many times undergrads might not have. So they know you're going to be able to communicate. They know you're going to be able to lead a team. You can send an email and show up on time. There's some things that you have from your experience that are really valuable. I think that's just great. And then finally, you're coming from different industry perspectives, like Meredith had just said. So you're bringing sort of a diversity of perspective that can add to a team. Similarly to how we were saying, you know, we want more women to be represented in tech. That's because through every walk of life, the best teams are made up of people from diversity and who have a diverse perspective. When you have different ideas in a room and all together, the outcomes are even greater. So with that said, first I would like to thank Sara and Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic. I also do want to sort of do a plug for my role with MCIT Online. So I provide career services for all of the MCIT Online students. What that looks like is one-on-one advising with students. I do programming such as skill building techniques like resume, cover letter networking, all those basics. I try and be there for you and help you through. And then I do other things like career spotlights. So we'll have employers come and do info sessions with students, or we'll invite alumni to come back and tell their stories, because these are all of the bits that you're working towards when you're thinking about your next career step. So just a quick plug for how I am embedded in MCIT Online. Rafia or Olivia, any last things to add? And also just again, thank you so much, Sara and Meredith. This was so valuable, and I think our panelists probably got a lot out of your perspectives.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for doing this, and thank you and the panelists for all of your important answers to these questions. So many amazing questions. Just for those of you that still have questions that haven't been answered, we are going to continue answering those questions after the webinar is over. If you have questions afterwards, you can always feel free to email us at onlinelearning@cs.upenn.edu. I'm actually going to post a bunch of links in the chat, which most people have access to. So you can contact us, you can visit us on YouTube, where this webinar will be posted not too far from now, as well as visit us on Facebook. In addition, keep in mind that if you're interested in applying to MCIT Online, we are still accepting applications for the spring 2021 cohort. The regular application deadline is October 1st. And after that, our fall cohort application will open in January on the 4th. But once again, feel free to sign up for virtual office hours that we have with admissions counselors. So if you have other questions about the program, about the application process, etc., we would love to speak with you. And the links will be in the chat box below. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.